So I want to welcome you to this video companion series for 4 Days to Change. I'm really excited that you're joining me on this journey. I'm going to walk you through this book a little bit more with adding some more detail, pulling out some of the key concepts in each of the chapters, giving you some more reflection questions about those, answering some questions that come up around those, as well as pointing you to some more resources and suggesting how you can take and apply the concepts you're learning in the here and now today at work and in your life. So 4 Days to Change, it was a book that took me about 3 years to write over time, and I wanted to capture the essence of what we've been doing for 25 years with these unusual programs where we bring together white men for 3.5 days and really examine, what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be male? And for some of us heterosexual, and look at all the other ways we're the same and different. And what's our unique role in engaging our white male colleagues so that others don't have to carry that burden to educate us and to intervene around our behavior? And what's our work with each other? And that's a piece that's been missing a lot in the inclusion movement and the diversity and equity movement. So this is a resource for you. Maybe you're not a white male, but you're curious about understanding white men in that role. And so welcome for you as well. So the foreword for this book was written by my co-founder, Bill Proudman, and it'll give you a chance to look at his journey and some of the mentors that he's had in his life and how he came into this work. And he's been an awesome partner to have for 25 years in working and creating change. The introduction to the book is really about creating a business case or illuminating the business case for diversity. And, we talk a little bit about, what's the cost of discrimination out in the US and worldwide? What's the cost of lost productivity for employees that don't feel heard, don't feel seen, or maybe don't even feel safe? What's the cost of retention, loss of retention? What's the cost of loss of productivity and morale? And then there's a whole nother series which is about customers. What about customers as women or of color or LGBT? And if you're not aware of the uniqueness of each of those groups, how are you doing at capturing that market in the workplace, in the world? And so there's all kinds of layers to the business case for diversity. And it's important for you to reflect on which ones do you see, which ones might you not have seen before, so that you can be aligned with, not just that this is the right thing to do, but this makes sense from a business perspective, from a government, from a leadership perspective, from being a citizen, and all those different layers and what matters most to you, figuring out how it matters. Because the more you can communicate all of those different areas, other people are going to resonate with different things. And some people need to see how the way things are with the partnerships not optimized across difference, that there's a cost to that. There's a cost to that for morale, a cost of it for wasted energy and productivity and retention and lack of, really connecting to customers. So that's the introduction, and there's a lot of resources that it points to. I also want you to notice, what's your mindset? Is your mindset one of a win-lose, where as a white guy, if you think others are gain, women, people of color, other groups, if they're going to gain, am I going to lose? And that's a zero-sum mindset. And there's some resources that are finite, but there's many that are infinite. And what I have found over and over and over in my work in this journey is that others gain and I gain too. I gain a lot in terms of being a better leader, being a better father, being a better spouse, significant other, and being a better human and a citizen. And so less nagging sense of guilt that somehow I'm the problem around diversity. I have more permission to be myself and be authentic in how I engage with others. I have conversations that I never dreamed I could have, whether it's around race or sexual orientation with others, so I can be in a learning mode and I don't have to avoid making mistakes, because that's a human part of the journey, is doing that. And I need to do that so I can continue to learn. And so give yourself permission to discover on this journey that it's a win-win. And part of it is realizing we have a culture, and if we don't know that, we just think we're being good humans, and we judge everybody else by that same lens, and that's a form of unconscious bias, and it locks us into that same culture. So some of those benefits for me are being more in my heart, having permission to be in head and heart, having permission to slow down and be in the now, as opposed to I only have value when I'm doing and fixing things. And really permission to ask questions, ask for help, to say I don't know. Those aren't things encouraged by what I see as dominant white male culture in the US and beyond. And so I step outside of that cultural box. I get more freedom to bring more of that other parts of me, or parts of my humanness that actually is essential for partnerships in work and outside of work in my personal life too. Looking forward to that, sharing more about that with you. So chapter 1 is about my wake-up call, how I started to learn. I grew up in Iowa, and I eventually worked in Minnesota, and I started in engineering, moved to psychology, and I found all that a little research oriented, so I went to Outward Bound and learned how to facilitate learning through canoe expeditions, dog sledding expeditions, teaching people they can do more than they think they can, and that we need other people, which are the two tenets of Outward Bound. And then I got a chance to go to Washington, D.C., and in an organizational development master's program, partly taught by NTL Institute, which has a strong commitment to social justice. And so we had intense conversations over our 2 years on race and gender. And it was really there that I realized I'm part of this group, white men. There were 7 of us in that class, and most of us hadn't thought about that before, and how our world is unique and different than others in our class. And so that was hard. Sometimes I felt blamed, sometimes I felt shame, sometimes I felt confused, and it was the beginning of my journey. And I took advantage of that to lean into it and learn, and then I became a sense that this is a part of my life path. And so I went to South Africa with Outward Bound to teach interracial team building in mining groups and banks and other companies there. So I spent a little under a year facilitating 10 8-day courses there that were particularly about interracial team building. And so that's what the rest of that chapter 1 is about, my journey there, meeting my friend in Tabalane, who I still am connected with, and others over there that had an impact on me. And it was through that year that I had a sense that I need to work with other white guys, other white men, and particularly coming back to the US. So after my time in South Africa, I came back and I spent 7 years or so doing research through a doctorate dissertation at the Fielding Graduate University in Santa Barbara. And I studied pathways to diversity for white men. So I traveled around the country and interviewed 8 guys who did diversity full time around what triggered their learning in their life, what triggered them moving towards advocacy. And I found that most of them learned everything from women, people of color, and other groups. And I remember presenting the results of that, and this black woman stood up and said, if that's the pathway to diversity for white men, I'm exhausted because I don't have the energy to educate all of you. She's right. That's not sustainable. If you think of the top of many organizations in the US and beyond, there's loads of men and loads of white men, and it's not sustainable to have a small part of the population have to teach. And, if you had to have mixed group race conversations and diversity conversations, the same people of color have to come back every week for a new diversity session to work with a new group of white guys. So, Bill Proudman, another Outward Bound instructor, path person who has a similar philosophy of experiential education, was thinking about this too, and we got together. And that's the beginning of chapter 2. Where we met and decided to start doing this work together. And he piloted a white men's caucus while I was finishing my dissertation, and then we decided to do those together and offer those. And I remember the early days, we were scared. It was like, what are these guys going to do to us? What do they think? Are they going to reject this? Are they going to accept this? And it's that edge of working with our own group that need. And we come from a place of validation, we come from a place of love, we come from a place of challenge, understanding, one of the things that we talk about in that first chapter of the caucus in the book, which is chapter 2. Well, first of all, a couple other things. That setting that I write in the book, actually Channel Lakes Resorts, is a real setting. It's now called something else. But it was the site of the first Shell internal White Men's Caucus. It was the first time we went inside a company and did all members from inside as opposed to mixtures of different companies. So that was edgy for us. It was an all corporate group. And Channel Lakes Resorts is like a fishing place where there's alligators in the different ponds. And there is still a snapping turtle there that's like 250 pounds and lives there. So that's all real. It's in the story. So I chose to use that unique place for this setting, for this book. And there's 4 characters in the book that I kind of took from different archetypes of different white guys from over the years. Frank is an alpha male. Joe is a skeptical, analytic guy in his head a lot. Al is more in his heart, a heartfelt guy. And Lee is a quiet introvert. And there's elements of those archetypes in white men I've worked with for years, over the years. And so... and Bill and I. And actually I would have had more people in the book, but I actually thought I could introduce them later, and my editor said later, nope, you can't. So it ended up being a small group, and it was actually kind of cool because it was a focus on an in-depth, intense interaction, which the caucus really does feel like an intense, what often men call life-changing experience. So that's the setting, is in that place, north of Houston, where we work. So one of the things that happens in the first night of the White Men's Caucus is, we kind of set the foundation. We help people see, why are we here? And one of the ways to tap into that too is to say, what was it like telling people you were coming to a White Men's Caucus? And gosh, guys are pretty surprised, that, they didn't want to put it on their electronic calendar, White Men's Caucus. They didn't want to tell a lot of people about it. Maybe they just put diversity workshop. And this anxiousness about using the words white men is actually really good data, because when we focus on race, we always talk about people of color. Usually we talk about gender. We are examining women's experiences, and being white and being male aren't examined, nor being straight. And so the focus and the calling out of us as white men as a group is often like sort of a reactiveness. It's like, some guys think, am I going to get in trouble? Is this something wrong? There's scar tissue in their experience that says, they haven't necessarily been received well when they've been examining that part of themselves, or been taught that they're the problem and stuff. So they're a little hesitant. And then they're confused because they come to this thing where it's just white men, and they're like, how am I going to learn about diversity? Because how can I learn from other white guys? I need people of color and women. And that's another interesting reaction too, because we've been taught that people of color have to be teaching us about race, women. And as I said earlier, that's a huge burden. So how do we change that? Well, if we're only showing up with each other as white guys, we can't look to the others and say, do we have an issue here? Or would you represent your whole group and describe everything to us? We have to look to each other. And actually, we're experts being white and being male because we've done that our whole lives. We just haven't thought about it, and we haven't examined it. So we scratch the surface on that and start to think about it. And in a way it's not about bad being wrong or the problem. It's just about a blank spot on our awareness map of, and part of being white and being male is not to have to think about it much. We don't have to be conscious of it. We just fit in as the norm. So we just get to be vanilla. We just get to just be human. And, as a mentor, Bob Terry said, to be white is to not have to think about it. So we come here to intensely think about it. And some guys say, it's the most intense reflection I've done in anything for years. And I'm really a better person because of it. So that's the stage I set in chapter 1 and 2. A little of my background from Africa and how I got into it, partnering with Bill in chapter 2. And then we get going with the story. From there out into chapter 2, you're kind of engaged into the story. And we'll wake up in chapter 3 the next morning and continue on with the caucus. So I'm really glad you're joining. and look forward to sharing again a little bit about each of the chapters.